Good afternoon, folks. Happy night of Thanksgiving, I suppose, if you're a celebrator of the holidays. We have a three-gamer to cover. One of my favorite slates of the year. John, are you a big Thanksgiving slate guy?
Yeah, I always like this slate. I always love the strategy of just the way that the timings are. Gives you a lot more room to swap. The other one I really like is the divisional weekend because those are always really good games, and also you have a lot of time to swap. And now we have our late swaps finally up and running, so should be a fun one.
Yeah, I'm with you. I love the Thanksgiving slate. I love smaller slates in general because there's more opportunities, I think, for leverage, just given the way that the field builds. And then you get a holiday slate where more casuals are likely to enter, pricing
Yep.
softer, so more options to get unique while leaving salary on the board. And like you said, the late swap edge is huge, where myself and many others will be getting inebriated on Thursday and potentially forgetting to swap lineups or making minus EV decisions later in the day. So pretty excited to dig into it. I think we should go chronologically down the line. So maybe just like start with the noon game, go down the line from there.
Yeah.
Right on. So first game of the day is going to be Bears traveling to Detroit to play in a dome game. Highest total on the slate. Also, I believe the biggest spread on the slate. It's a great environment early in the day. We've got Chicago coming off the past two games from canning Shane Waldron, their OC, and they look pretty good on offense. They look a lot better than they have. They're focusing on some more quick intermediate throws for Caleb, getting him comfortable. Caleb's looked better under pressure, putting, I think, 100 yards the last two games on the ground, or maybe it's the wrong quarterback I'm looking at, but 100 yards on the ground in the last two games, and 80 pass attempts with 0 interceptions for Caleb Williams. This is not the Bears that we were watching earlier in the season. And mind you, that's coming off of games against Green Bay and Minnesota, who obviously are some of the better defensive units in the league, Minnesota being number one going into that week. Tough divisional games as well. What are you seeing from the Bears, the new and improved Bears?
Yeah, I mean, they've looked a lot better without Waldron, which is really unsurprising. I'm hoping at the end of the year they just get rid of Eberflus too, bring in Ben Johnson. Actually, really the ideal would be just bring in Ben Johnson for this game, just have him like switch booths. That would be the ideal for the Bears. Yeah, I mean, I've like Caleb's been really good the last couple of weeks. They've kind of given a lot more freedom, it seems like, to run. I think he had 9 carries the first week against Green Bay. I don't know how many he had last week, but he was pretty successful through the air, throwing to Keenan Allen. Yeah, I think this, 2 weeks ago, I was thinking this Thanksgiving slate was going to be terrible because the Bears offense looked bad. The Giants are blowing everybody out. And I was looking like Tommy DeVito against Cooper Rush. And now we have at least 2 games that look like they're going to have a lot of points.
Yep. And obviously the game script here sets up well for Detroit. They like to pound the rock. The Bears are susceptible on the ground, a lot more so than the pass. So 30th DVOA against the run for the Bears, but 10th against the pass, namely due to their cornerback Jalen Johnson, who sort of locks down the perimeter of the field. We saw that against the Vikings last week, where Justin Jefferson didn't get much done, but Addison and Hawkinson, I think, both went for the 100-yard bonus and had good games. So, I mean, obviously, we've seen on the main slate before that like a Detroit full onslaught, play everybody from Detroit wins on like a 12-gamer. And now we've got them on a 3-gamer where they have the highest team implied total. Gibbs plus Montgomery combo we always tout as like viable on a main slate with 12 games, and now we get them in a 3-gamer in a good rushing matchup with the highest implied team total. What is there not to like from the Lions this week?
I mean, you pretty much nailed it. I don't really have much to say about their offense that's not positive. I mean, they're right there in terms of EPA per play with Baltimore and I'm blanking on the other team. Who's the other team with the running quarterback? Baltimore, and we're off to a rough start.
You're not thinking of Washington, are you?
Philly.
Detroit
is right there with Baltimore and Philly in terms of rush EPA per play, which is really impressive considering Goff never runs. Those 2 teams have Hurts and Lamar Jackson. Obviously, it's a lot easier to take off with the ball. So for the fact that Gibbs and Montgomery are that efficient is really impressive. I really don't mind getting both of them in lineups this week or this slate, even on a small 3-gamer like this. I think it's a pretty good way to build. I'm just kind of curious to see how many people actually do that, and then how many people, when they do that, do they just run it back with Caleb and Keenan, or a couple Bears receivers?
Yeah, when I,
I'm not a Philly hater. I've been espousing how good Philly has been for weeks now. It's the Philly fans that hate the Niners because the Niners won last year and won by 40 and ruined their season. That's the real anger between Philly and San Francisco.
Oh, that's great. I've been running Sims today, and I've been playing with different combinations from the Bears and the Lions. And I did notice that if you are playing Monty and Gibbs in the same lineup, it pairs well with a Caleb Williams stack with one, two, or three of his pass catchers, which makes sense because the Lions are going to score. And if their production does go through the ground between Gibbs and Monty, it kind of makes sense that the game script sets up that Chicago's going to have to throw the ball a lot. And we've seen them throw a lot the past 2 weeks. I think 38 dropbacks and 40 in another. Yeah, I mean, the ownership between the two is kind of similar. Pricing's kind of similar. You get a $1,000 discount for Montgomery, but like we said, pricing on the slate's pretty loose. We'll talk about more ways to differentiate yourself this slate, but pricing is going to be one of them.
Yeah.
We have sort of the revenge narrative for Monty, going back up against the Bears who let him walk. I don't really factor that into anything. I like Monty most weeks anyway. It's not, I'm not going to give him a boost just because he's playing the Bears, but I'm going to have tons of Gibbs, tons of Montgomery, tons of them together. I think this game is going to be a high percentage of my entries this week.
Yeah, definitely. I was running Sims last night, and I posted one on our Discord that was like Caleb with 2 or 3 Bears receivers, and then both Detroit running backs and the Detroit defense, which feels like that's definitely viable on this slate. So, yeah, definitely going to be a lot of this game and a lot of Lions offense. What do you have a kind of a take here on the Lions receivers, kind of at their ownership? You talked about Jalen Johnson, who's really good. I'm not really worried about him for Amon-Ra St. Brown just because he moves around so much on the field, but I am kind of worried about Jameson Williams, and the ownership kind of shows that too.
Yeah, so there's like a couple scenarios there. Like you said, like Amon-Ra, I think he's running slot routes at like a 35 or 40% rate. So I'm not worried about like production there. And he's so efficient when he does get the ball per touch that, Jalen Johnson or not, I'm not, docking anything there. I think it does get interesting. Who is their receiver that they're missing? Is it Khalif Raymond? Yeah. With Khalif Raymond out, that opens up more routes for a guy like Jameson Williams or like even Tim Patrick maybe. And to me, I think it makes sense for the Lions to throw out a decoy for Jalen Johnson to just get him away from the playmakers. But they do sort of move those around a bit. And I'm not sure if it's Jameson Williams. I'm not sure if it's Tim Patrick. I'm not taking it into consideration a whole lot just because it's a short slate and there's so many options for Detroit and they're so efficient with the ball that it's not a huge deal for me, but definitely boost a guy to like Hawkinson, I think benefits from that, or not Hawkinson, Laporta benefits from that. And I think Amon-Ra does too when he's running out of the slot, just because that there's no focus from Jalen Johnson. Yeah,
I'm with you there. I mean, there's reason for concern with Jameson, but he's 12% on right now projected on DraftKings from ETR. So yeah, I mean that's a pretty decent sign that people are kind of have the same concern you do, which makes him a decent GPP play. I mean, we've seen him. He's the ultimate inverse correlation guy where you can bet him under 3 catches, over 80 yards receiving, and a touchdown for like 50 to 1.
Yeah,
exactly. Pretty often. So, and that's all you need from him on this slate as well.
Yeah, I think he's in a weird pricing point around some other value options we'll talk about later. But I think that's one of the main reasons that he's not getting as much love from the field. And I think it's also like, we said it before, it's hard to play, 4 or 5 Lions on the same lineup, on the main slate for sure, but a little easier on this slate. But it's hard for hand builders and optimizers to get there because hand builders aren't clicking 4 or 5 players from the same team. And then optimizers, I don't know how many people are actually adjusting the rules this week and sort of running out those skinny stacks that are better in large field with like QB +2 and 1 run back. Whereas on these smaller slates, you really want to concentrate, on game environments or on offenses entirely. So I'm not sure, how popular it is because Amon-Ra is an easy click. Laporta hasn't been great this year, but I do think that, given some of the other options, I think he will get some ownership. And then the running backs are such good plays that I don't know how many people are getting all the way down to Jameson Williams and saying that they feel confident there, where you've got guys like Jalen Tolbert or guys like Dontavian Wicks in a similar area as him and who project out as like a median better play.
Yeah. The only concern I'd have about that is just we've seen Detroit onslaughts, like 5 players from Detroit, win the Million Maker on DraftKings twice this year. So people may be less hesitant to do that than they normally would. But yeah, I mean, your point's definitely taken. Do you have a opinion on Roschon Johnson on FanDuel, where he's been the goal line back? He's cheap, unknown, and he just needs a touchdown.
Yeah, I don't know if a touchdown gets it done just on FanDuel. There's so many good running back plays this late, and especially on FanDuel where it is touchdown dependent. I think Roschon needs two to be cracking an optimal lineup, unless something wild happens and all of Detroit's volume goes through the air. Josh Jacobs has a dud game. Maybe they're playing from behind and have to throw a lot. Maybe Achane doesn't get any work. There's a lot of scenarios where that never works. There might be like a 0.5% chance where Roschon, squeaks his way into an optimal. I won't be getting there in my contest. Maybe if you're playing like the 500,000 entry, DraftKings special, maybe you get there, but I don't think 6 points on FanDuel or DraftKings is going to get it done from a Roschon play.
Yeah. I'm kind of thinking about the next game with Rico Dowdle projecting for so much ownership. If Dowdle plus Keenan Allen, what do you need from like CD Lamb? Let's say you were to go Roschon Johnson, CD Lamb versus Rico Dowdle and Keenan Allen. What do you really need from the Roschon and CD Lamb side? Oh, we got the bark. You know what that means? All in Roschon.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I'm dog sitting, so any little noise is setting them off right now. I mean, for upside, I like the CD play more than I like Keenan. But Dowdle, we'll talk about Dowdle too. I don't love Dowdle this slate, but I think the volume's obviously going to be there, and they are home favorites. Like you'd probably have to take like the Dowdle side of that. You could get to Roschon. I think it's fine if you're playing larger tournaments, but you are banking on 2 scores from him from the goal line.
Yeah, I agree. Coolers with a good point. I was just about to bring it up. We're doing it together. I keep clicking on it too. Yeah, I feel like this is the case. I mean, people will see this Detroit beating these teams by 40. I do think people aren't going to be a little more hesitant than normal to play the Caleb stack, even though it's been better. I do wonder if Sims and optimizers are going to bring Caleb ownership up a little bit because these Bears receivers are pretty popular between Keenan and Odunze. So I kind of wonder about that, but I do think that in general, the Caleb stack with Swift is going to be underowned.
Yeah, that's how I took down the power sweep a few weeks ago was a QB running back stack with a wide receiver. So I think that stack in general is underutilized, and Swift does get some pass down work. It's not like he's just a clear between the tackles runner. So I mean, it definitely works. Game script sets up well for him. Lions are obviously going to be getting tons of blitzes and tons of pressures on Caleb Williams. We've seen him get the ball out quicker the past 2 weeks, which is good for them. But he's going to be a safety valve on a lot of plays, and just PPR alone on DraftKings on a DeAndre Swift who's coming in basically unowned relative to the field and actually has a starting role in the offense. I think that's a totally fine play, and it's a great way to find leverage off of like a chalky Keenan Allen, for example.
Yep, I agree. Do you have an opinion on these Bears receivers, the 3 of them?
Yeah, I'm higher on Odunze, Swift, and more so than Keenan. And it's mainly an ownership play for me. I think they're kind of similar. DJ Moore is running these he might have like a negative ADOT, I think, the last 2 weeks. Honestly, they're just throwing him quick screens, but he's really good after the catch. So, I mean, we saw it last week. I think he only got 6 or 7 targets last week and obviously had a monster game. Keenan Allen also had a monster game last week, but it was on a lot of volume. And, he's Keenan Allen. He's old, probably over the hill now. He can still run routes fine, but like he's not the same Keenan Allen he was. He's just a big target to throw the ball at. So I'm less likely to go on a guy like Keenan where he has to get there on volume and PPR points compared to a guy like Odunze who may not be earning as much volume, but shows incredible upside. I think his ADOT's like over 15 yards, downfield playability, and obviously the game script sets up well for him.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Keenan definitely has benefited from the change in the offense, it seems like so far, but Odunze at half the ownership, getting all the deep balls, is very attractive to me on this slate.
Yeah, this slate's all about finding ways to be different and generating leverage without going to like a 4% owned backup running back or something. And the way you're stacking things, whether it's like a game over stack or just getting away from the chalky stack option, like Caleb plus Keenan plus Odunze is going to be chalky. Why not play Caleb plus Swift plus Odunze or Caleb plus Swift plus Kmet? It's going to be a really important way to differentiate your lineups without, sacrificing so much projection that you're basically hoping for a lottery ticket.
Yeah.
For this game, I'm going to have tons of exposure. One, because it kind of sets you up well for the next games to swap into stuff on your lineups that don't hit in the early games and stay on stuff that does. Probably attacking it through the Caleb Williams side, just because I think if this game produces a winning score for GPPs, I think that the game kind of has to stay close. I will have some like Jared Goff onslaught stacks with the Lions defense with like basically no Bears run backs, just on the off chance that we've only seen a 2-week sample. Yeah, they've looked good, and they've looked good against good defenses, but the Lions are a bit different this year, and who knows if the Bears just revert back to looking like their old selves.
Yeah, and just in general, like the way this sets up is this is the game you want to be taking shots with, like really low owned plays, like Roschon Johnson, or with unique builds. And then if those items get there, then you can swap to all like the obvious plays in the late window. But like this in general, like this is the game you want to be kind of taking some shots on unique players and builds.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. Anything else you want to cover from this game?
Mm-mm.
Right on. Let's move on to the early afternoon slate. Giants traveling to Dallas. 4-point spread, a bit lower total in the game. However, we do have some injury news. Tommy DeVito not playing for the Giants. They'll be, I think, with an upgrade with their quarterback. So Drew Lock, saw him play backup snaps at Denver. Looked fine. Looked, startable as a quarterback. Definitely over Tommy DeVito, who's just like a statue in the pocket. I think would get torn up by Micah Parsons in this game. Still think Micah Parsons is probably going to have a good game here, but I think the Giants have, more opportunity to score here than the field is kind of giving them credit for. In this game in particular, we're having massive chalk on Rico Dowdle, which I get. He's finally kind of clawed back that usage from Zeke to himself, has the role that we want as a home favorite. However, the ownership, to me, is nuts. Looking on the other side with Tyrone Tracy, who I think has just as good of a matchup, has some pass catching abilities, might catch 2 or 3 receptions, and can easily put down 100 yards on the Cowboys here. And everybody thinks the Cowboys are going to walk over the Giants in this game. And the script, the scenario where that doesn't happen is where the Giants are able to establish the run, control drives, and they're doing that through Tyrone Tracy. So ways to get different from the field here, I think, is just sort of flipping the game script on its head. Cooper Rush and the Cowboys aren't like some amazing team. We were playing streaming defenses against them for a few weeks, and then, they thought they would get stomped in Washington, but that obviously didn't happen. Showed a bit more of a spark there. Cooper Rush is still throwing a ton. But I think the Giants are totally live here. I probably won't be running out, any Drew Lock stacks, but I love playing like the Cooper Rush passing side to get off the chalk of Dowdle and then running it back with like a Neighbors or a Tyrone Tracy.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of, I want to say it was 2020 or 2021 during COVID.
2020, the B-Rob game.
Yeah, with Washington. And Dallas' season was over, and they just completely gave up on Thanksgiving. And Washington, you needed, I think, Gibson and Robinson, if I remember right. That was, they just got blown out, and they got run all over. I mean, I could definitely see that scenario here. The only real counter I say on Drew Lock is Cooper Rush is $300 more in a much more pass-happy offense. And when you play Cooper Rush, you're getting direct leverage off of Rico Dowdle, who on FanDuel right now, like ETR, I think has him at about 60%, and Stochastic at 70%. The Rush CD stack without Dowdle is just like such obvious leverage here that I really don't mind getting to that at all. And you can obviously run that back with Tracy right on the other side and just say Giants get the lead and then Dallas is forced to throw the ball. And we've seen how many times with Dallas when they fall behind early, they're going to go no huddle and throw the ball every play if they have to. So I really like the Cooper Rush and CeeDee Lamb side. I wish I could say I like any of the other Dallas receivers. Schoonmaker is okay as an option, but even he was losing snaps to Brevin Span Ford last week. What's the deal with Brandon Cooks? Is he confirmed in?
Yeah, we'll get Brandon Cooks back. He's been out.
Beaver legend Brandon Cooks. Biletnikoff winner. All-time great Beaver. Brandon Cooks. Shout out Brandon Cooks. He played
4 weeks this season and did not really look great in any of them. I think he had one game where he popped off, but it was on limited volume and I think like a blown coverage sort of play. I love the CeeDee Lamb pivot. He's had 10 plus targets in the last 6 games maybe. Yeah. And that's not going to stop this game. And if Rico Dowdle's 60% and everybody's just thinking this is like a 21-13 game and all they do is pound the rock all day with Rico Dowdle, I mean, that's just clear leverage off the field to stack the quarterback and wide receiver one and then come back on the other side and say, hey, this game's actually competitive. And it's also leverage off the defenses here. So the defensive ownership in this game is super chalk as well. And who's to say, like, I love going to like the Packers and the Lions on defense, or even playing Cooper Rush against the Giants. Like, Cooper Rush is not infallible, to a couple sacks or turnovers either. So, playing your quarterback against the defense on the Thanksgiving slate, totally viable.
Mm-hmm. And the Neighbors Cowboys combination feels really good too. 35% ownership on defense, even on 3-game slates, is pretty rough, but that feels like some decent negative correlation that you can actually see the Neighbors PPR upside plus Dallas getting sacks on Drew Lock. That seems like definitely a viable game script here. In general, like Neighbors with his talent as the lowest owned of these guys between him, CD, and Amon-Ra, that feels like a decent play to me. He's a squeaky wheel guy too. He was kind of complaining about not getting touches last week, and it's just so easy to scheme, short stuff for him. So I like Neighbors a little bit. I mean, really, I kind of like, as gross as it sounds in a game with a 39 total when you have the Miami, Green Bay, and Detroit offenses, I like getting to the passing games here a little bit.
Yeah, I do too. And it's kind of like, yes, we're playing DFS and we want to roster the best plays, but we're also playing like a strategy game here, right? Where if you knew going into a contest that every single player was playing a quarterback from either the early game or the late game, and you were going to be the only person to roster quarterback from the Giants and Cowboys game, it's a clear spot. And obviously it's not that extreme, but it sort of illustrates the point that yes, we are playing DFS and it's fun to play, good players, but there's also ownership considerations here as well. I like what you said about
that. You say that, and then it's like you're actually watching the game and you watch Cooper, like you play Drew Lock at no ownership.
I'm eating my words.
You just see him get sacked like 8 times.
I'm turning my phone off at like 4:30. But I like what you said about
that. To get that second helping.
Yeah. I like what you said about that group up top too of wide receivers between Lamb, Amon-Ra, and Neighbors, where pricing is soft enough where you can easily get to Amon-Ra if you want, and then CD's right below him. It's really tough to not click CD or Amon-Ra and go to Neighbors, but it's also tough for the field. And he has as much upside in this game as the other two do as well. It's a short slate. And leaving salary is a way to get different, and that sort of illustrates it. Those 3 wide receivers have a really high ceiling. 2 of them are going to be highly owned. 1 of them is not. It's worth taking shots on.
Yeah, and the salary thing, at least on DraftKings, you don't really need all the value this week. It's pretty easy to fit whoever you want. So leaving salary, you can still build good lineups leaving $2,000 on the table, which isn't normally the case for like a 3-game slate.
Yeah, Coolers brings up like my favorite way to stack this game, and like I said, I love Neighbors and Tracy this game, but I don't like pairing him with Drew Lock just because 1, his upside's not that high, and 2, that the volume is so concentrated. Like, will Wan'Dale Robinson or Theo Johnson like post a nuke spot here? Probably not. I'll eat my words later when somebody clips it and Wan'Dale catches like a 90-yarder. But it's so much easier to leverage off of Rico Dowdle, go Cooper Rush, CeeDee Lamb, and then I don't know, Tolbert, Cooks, Schoonmaker, whatever. And then just run it back with Neighbors and Tracy, knowing that if the game does shoot out and this is the game you have to have, it's likely that 1 or both of those players are going to be the reason that it does.
Yep.
Wisconsinite asking about below waist updates. My knee brace is off and I am walking around, so better nice. There. Yeah, well, I'm not walking around. I'm hobbling around, but mobile.
I'm in Oregon right now for my dad's 70th and Thanksgiving, and we went to lunch, and I got a twisted meniscus beer. I was thinking of you from Mackenzie Brewing out of Eugene.
Did you like steal some of like my hair or DNA and like put it in there and cast a potion or something?
Yeah, toil, trouble, whatever they say in Macbeth.
Yeah, Turpin available. Yeah, Turpin's playing. He is returning punts. To me, that's the Roschon Johnson thing too, but even worse because he's not a goal line back. He's a punt returner. Is 6 points from a wide receiver winning you a slate or getting you near the top? No. I just and the Cowboys defense is already chalky that the double dip doesn't really make any sense. Like, it makes more sense on like a showdown for sure, 1 game, and with a defense that's not super owned, but like Cowboys being chalk and then all the other value wide receivers around him that are liable to get more than 6 fantasy points on just targets and routes run alone. I don't think that Turpin's really a spot you can go to.
Yeah.
Tolbert, maybe, because he's a gadget guy. They'll scheme stuff up, and maybe he has an upside there, but I don't think you can go to Turpin.
Yeah, I mean, Turpin does have a ceiling, like we saw on Monday night. I mean, he's capable of breaking any play for a long. But with Cooks back, it's more crowded. They'll probably will still like scheme a couple passes for him this game, but just really, really tough to see it.
I'm gonna do some digging just to make sure I'm not stepping on my own feet here. But in the 4 games that Brandon Cooks did play, I'll have to pull him up here, so you might need to stall for me. But I'm pretty sure that having him back isn't going to impact Lamb as much as like some people might think. I've seen around the industry that there's some worries about Brandon Cooks coming back and like taking attention off of CD. But one, he's been the alpha in this offense, and teams are able to scheme around that for so long. Where like if you're dragging out Jalen Tolbert as like your wide receiver 2 or Jalen Brooks as your wide receiver 2, the defense doesn't really have much to worry about. And not that Brandon Cooks is washed or anything. Like he's capable of drawing attention on defense, and that might open up more looks for CD. Maybe his targets aren't as peppered. Not as much of the short stuff and all that. But if the defense is spending less time focusing on CD and worrying about other threats, there's more opportunities for broken coverage. There's more opportunities for him to get open without being zone covered or double teamed.
Yeah. My intuition would be that it helps CD more than hurts to have another name back.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Other things I wanted to bring up here. Oh yeah, last week Tyrone Tracy continued his fumbling issues, and we saw Devin Singletary coming for some snaps. Maybe that's one of the reasons he's coming in lower owned on this slate. People are just kind of worried in general about the Giants, and then there's obvious considerations about can he hang on to the football? What happens if he fumbles and they yank him for the rest of the game or the rest of the quarter or something? Sure, yeah, it's a consideration and a worry, but I'm totally willing to play into that on a 3-game slate for a Tyrone Tracy who's capable of upside and coming in super well owned relatively to other plays.
Yeah, especially, and on FanDuel, 1/3 the ownership of Dowdle, and in my opinion, a way more talented player. Both equally bad offenses too. So yeah, I like Tracy a lot here. Just in general, for me, I'm going to be under Dowdle, over CD, over Tracy, and I already know I'm going to be so tilted when we get the Dowdle 15 carries, 45 yards, 3 touchdowns, or whatever.
Yeah, it's going to be like the downside of me tweets, where like I can't believe it's 61% Rico Dowdle hit all these donkeys, the whole thing. Which
when he gets that second first half rushing touchdown from 3 yards out, I know I'm gonna be like, oh, we can still hit the nuts. Sign up for showdown.
Micah Parson like drills Drew Lock on the backside on a drop back. They fumble at the 3 or something, pick it up, and it's like it's just Dowdle shove time. It's gonna happen.
Or even better, the CD gets open and he gets open and pass interference or whatever gets down to the 3. Dowdle scores.
Yeah,
that's what's gonna happen to me. I guess
it's gonna happen to us. We're gonna play him anyway, and we're gonna lose money. It's fine.
Yep.
Anything else you want to cover here before we move on?
No, just a mess of a game. Hopefully the thing is, like, when there's a lot of uncertainty, like there is with this game, there is more room for upside than like 39 total might normally suggest. So hopefully we do see that upside, because it kind of sucks when that like the middle game is bad, because especially on Thanksgiving, like this is the time where you're either probably done with your first meal or whatever, and this is the time when you're actually going to sit down and watch the game. So hopefully this one's a little more entertaining than we think.
Yeah, it is a dome environment. We have 2 dome environments moving on to the other game, which obviously won't be a dome environment, but there's room there, right? It's 3 games. Yeah. It's not guaranteed that one of them is gonna pop off more than the other. So definitely room for ways to be different here, and I'll likely be getting different here than the field. I just don't see why they're playing it the way they are. So
yep, I agree.
Moves us on to Lambeau Field. Dogs don't like that, I guess. Must be another NFC.
Trying to warn you.
We've got Miami traveling to Green Bay and Lambeau for a cold game, windy game, possibly a snowy game. There's also like narratives about Tua in cold weather. Played Bama, plays Miami, Hawaii kid. There's narratives there. I don't really care about that too much, but there is something to be said about the Packers and how they've been playing the past few weeks, or I guess the season in general. Matt LaFleur has shown a tendency to just pound the rock when he can. We saw that last week with Josh Jacobs obviously getting fed 3 touchdowns. And the Miami defense sets up as a defense you kind of want to run on. It's not like a super, pass funnel defense. They're pretty good on the perimeters and sort of weaker in that middle of the field area.
Yeah, if I had told you before the season we were going to get Tyreek Hill on a 3-game slate at $6,900 and he's going to be 20% owned, would you believe it?
No, dude.
On DraftKings too.
I figured he'd be the highest price wide receiver on the slate, and I figured he'd still be the highest owned wide receiver on the slate.
Yeah, and this is crazy how much his stock has fallen. The last I saw was that this is going to be dry. They're expecting dry and only 10-mile-an-hour gusts, so not too bad.
Okay.
And also like upper 20s in terms of temperature, which also compared to what Lambeau can normally be, that's not too bad at all. So I'm not too worried about the Dolphins offense here.
No,
but,
me neither.
Who knows?
It would be cool to have the traditional holiday snowy Lambeau game. Those are always great to watch. But
yeah,
Packers are going to be missing Jair Alexander this game. So I mean, there are room for upside for the Dolphins receivers, and in general, I think there's upside for the Packers offense passing game too. I mean, the scenario I set up where LaFleur likes to pound the rock and maybe they're playing from ahead, that's certainly possible, but also the field is considering that with the ownership difference between Josh Jacobs and Jordan Love, relative to other pieces in their position tier. But we've seen games where Love can sling the ball and throw for 300 yards, 4 touchdowns, and Miami is willing to do the same. They've scored 30 points in the last 5 games, albeit against teams like the Raiders and the Patriots. Green Bay is going to be a bit tougher for them for sure, but again, it's a 3-gamer, and we have 2 explosive offenses with Jaden Reed on one side, Tyreek Hill and Achane on the other. I mean, there's absolute ceiling to find here.
Yeah, and I do feel like Jordan Love has been on the wrong side of some touchdown variance here. I mean, Christian Watson last week dropped the easiest touchdown I've ever seen on like a 50-yard touchdown, and then Jacobs
right off like his chest plate or something, or fingertips.
But not, he was just holding. He was like this, and it just hit him right in the hands, and it just bounced off his hands. So, relative to ownership here, I do like the Packers passing game more than playing Jacobs. Now we have seen Jacobs get more involved in the past too, so you could play him with Love. I think in the Sims I was getting last night though, it was mostly Love stacks without Jacobs, which is pretty interesting. But I definitely like getting a lot of this game.
Yeah, if I'm stacking Love, it's going to be with the pass catchers, who we probably should talk about. Romeo Doubs suffered a concussion, obviously not going to turn around over a short weekend and play on Thursday. So Doubs will be out, and that's going to lead to more snaps for guys like Malik Heath, Bo Melton, and Dontavian Wicks, who I believe the industry is sort of projecting to get that main role, and I think he will. The ownership, I don't think they're quite right on yet. Like Wicks, I think is going to be way more owned than 18%. You have a lean there?
Feels like it, but maybe he won't be just because the Jacobs ownership. Maybe people will just go like, I just want to play the Jacobs and maybe Reed, and that's it. I don't know. Yeah, I do agree. Like for value, like he seems like a pretty obvious value here. Unless other places aren't projecting Wicks to take the number 3 role, but I just even last week it seemed like he was on the field most of the time. I'd have to look at the actual snap counts, but
yeah, it's Wicks leading that snap count. Like maybe the reason he isn't being owned as much is just like you said, like value isn't something you really have to search for this week. I haven't found a roster I've tried to build yet that I was like, oh, I just need like an extra $200 to fit this one guy. And like you can kind of fit in, whoever you want to play. And I mean, that being said, if I'm playing like the Love stacks and Wicks comes up to super high ownership, I might just like pivot off to Reed, to Kraft, and maybe take a shot on one of the other guys. Like the production with Doubs off the field just skews heavily towards Reed as like the main usage guy. He soaks up a ton of that target volume and a ton of the routes run there. So like it just sets up better for Reed there on a guy who has ceiling, and people, instead of pivoting from Doubs to Reed, they want to go from Doubs to Wicks, which to me doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I really like Reed here at 5,700. Mini Debo.
Yeah,
and also like they do use him in the red zone, kind of like the Niners use Debo, where he could be vulturing a little bit from Josh Jacobs here, which would be the hope if you play him. This seems like it's gonna be a really fun game to watch. And I think this Packers offense is definitely like not only like pretty obvious we're targeting, but I do really like getting this passing game and not playing Jacobs with it.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. It's going to depend on my rosters, obviously, how they're set up and what they look like going into the late game for late swap stuff. But if you are, if you have a lineup that's up top and has a good shot, probably stick on Jacobs. If not, you can take some outside shots on these Packers pass catchers.
Yeah. What do you think about the Miami side?
Yeah, so I mean, A-Chain obviously probably one of the best running backs, if not the best one on the slate as far as just continued upside week after week. His role's really good, both passing and running. The target counts and target rates for the Dolphins since their bye really has been weird. It's like Jonnu leading for target share, and then it's like Achane tied with Waddle, and it's Hill fourth. So it's a really tough spot to stack for Tua. Like, who do you stack with him? You probably mix it up. Who do you run back from the Packers side? I think all those guys are in play. Hill, Waddle, Achane, and Jonnu. I'll have all those guys on my rosters. I do think that like the way I want to attack it is going to be through the Packers pass catching side, and then that kind of sets up well for Achane coming back on the other side, or maybe Jonnu. Because I think if Tyreek Hill or Waddle are sort of hitting their ceiling, it's probably going to come with Tua. And just I don't think that I'm going to get to Tua, maybe in my large MME stuff, but in my tighter builds, I don't think I'm getting to Tua. I think most of my concentration is going to be Caleb Williams, Jordan Love, and then sprinkles of Cooper Rush and Jared Goff.
The nice thing about playing Tua is he's just not a rushing threat at all. And so, the double and triple stops become way more viable that way. I mean, I want to play Tyreek, so I really want to play him at that ownership. And we've seen the upside with him how many times. But I mean, Miami in the bye week, they talked a lot about how they wanted to get Jonnu more involved, and they've lived up to it. And I think it's cost a lot of like the short looks that Tyreek used to get are gone now. I don't know how much I believe the Waddle is now like the new Tyreek thing, where he's getting all the targets and Tyreek isn't. I mean, as a Waddle, I'm heavily invested in Waddle in season-long fantasy, and he's been so frustrating all year. And that was like finally he has one blow-up game. I don't know. I just feel like at some point we're going to see the Tyreek mega nuke, and it wouldn't surprise me if it's here on like the nighttime 2-touchdown 150 yards receiving game.
Yeah, I know that would be just true sicko stuff because we've been on him all year. His price just keeps falling. His ownership just keeps falling. He had that spat, where Tua obviously wasn't starting, and he was kind of hard to click there, but. Even with Tua back, the offense looks really good, and Tyreek's production just is not there. I'm probably going to be underweight the field here just because it doesn't really fit my roster constructions and like the quarterbacks I'm trying to target. That being said, it is about raw points on this slate, and I wouldn't be shocked, if he had 18 points and was optimal.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, the upside is just so good with Tyreek. It's tough to say. It's tough. It's just tough seeing that ownership 3-game slate. One of the elite receiver talents in the league. It's just tough not to be like, I got to figure out ways to get him in my lineups. Yeah, I mean, a good thing. But one way to do it would be build lineups with Amon-Ra or CD Lamb, and then just swap out to Tyreek, and then you're automatically giving yourself salary. That would be one way to do it. But I mean, it's just obviously his place in the offense isn't nearly as secure as those guys.
Yeah, Tyreek's still dealing with that issue he got during week 1, but
yeah,
I don't know to what extent is that actually affecting his game. Like,
I don't know. It's so hard to tell.
It's not a lower body injury like where he can't run routes or separate like he used to, right? It's just a wrist thing where like maybe he winces going up for a pass, like maybe he doesn't have full mobility in the wrist, but like that doesn't mean he isn't going to get targets in the offense, like scheme targets, and it doesn't affect his ability to separate on routes. I'm just confused as to why he has not looked like he has in years past just due to a wrist injury.
Yeah, and he's still way over Waddle in terms of targets on the year and air yards. So I don't know. I can't believe that the wrist thing is really that much of an issue. But I mean, right, I don't know, maybe it is. I don't know.
It feels like not a cop out or like an excuse to the way that Daniels is running the offense or anything, but like it just doesn't seem like a limiting factor. Like I'm not playing Tyreek because he has a wrist injury. I'm just not playing him in general because he doesn't fit most of my roster constructions.
Yeah, I'm trying to see the ones I was running last night, what I was getting. These were FanDuel. But I was mostly getting Love, kind of like we were just talking about, Love and Caleb stacks with a little bit of like some weird like Cooper Rush stuff mixed in. And just like looking at this was the $1 million one, the $15 on FanDuel with 80,000 entries.
Yeah.
I mean, I was getting almost no 16% Tyreek. So even under the projected ownership. I don't know. I wonder if just the way that the industry works now with everybody's using tools, I wonder if he just gets even lower than 24%. Like what if One thing I'll test out is like set his ownership to 15%, and then see how much I get in my sim builds.
Yeah, I would be curious. I think we're going to move on to building lineups and kind of showing you ways to build differently on these smaller slates. But before we do that, I want to let you guys know that we are running a promo code at AceMind for Black Friday. You can use promo code BF30. You'll see it in the bottom right of the corner over there. That's the promo code. Head to acemind.io. And this is for new and returning customers. So like if you used our tool and for some reason didn't like it and want to come back, you can get 30% off your first month using promo code BF30. So be sure to check that out. Let's talk about building lineups and how we can approach it differently this week on a 3-gamer. I'm going to go over to the optimizer I've got set up over here. And I kind of want to chat about the way the sim builds lineups and then the way that the optimizer build lineups and how they differ. And then, for stacking partners, number of stacking partners. Do you want to chat quick about, the types of combinations that the sim gets to versus the type of combinations you get to in an optimizer?
Yeah, I mean, the sim doesn't really use any heuristics that you might use normally when you're building lineups in optimizer. We do have like how many teams can have double stacks and all that. But all we really do when we're building the sim lineups are just checking number of players against defense and your minimum allowed salary for the contest, and then how far off the optimal lineup are your lineups allowed to be. So like we don't add any other heuristics. We just kind of let the correlations decide which lineups that we've built are going to sim the best.
Yep. So a way that I like building on these smaller slates is building overstacks or team overstacks. And like we talked about earlier, on a 3-gamer, there might only be 1 or 2 teams or game environments that produce all the fantasy point scoring. And the way that hand builders build and the way that traditional optimizers will build with skinny stack rules is that they aren't going to get a lot of these combinations where you're pairing a quarterback with 4 players from the same team. So even though all the players on your roster might be owned at a significant rate, they're not going to be owned in the same construction. So what I've done in the optimizer here is I set up a rule to pair a quarterback with 4 positions or 4 players from the same team of running back, wide receiver, and tight end. And I set that up to run 1,000 lineups with mostly default salary. And what that's going to do if I hit run here is that's going to build lineups like Goff plus Gibbs plus Amon-Ra plus Laporta, which might not be an easy one for hand builders to get to or might not be for a traditional optimizer to get to with their stacking rules. So I'm interested to see how these build out, and we'll go and sim them. Another thing you can do if you want to be even more specific than that on the optimizer is you can do it by player. So I could say, at least 4 of, Montgomery, Gibbs, Amon-Ra, Laporta, and I'll throw JMO in there as well. And then
should note while you're doing this that these onslaughts are DraftKings specific. FanDuel, you can only do up to 4 per team. That said, just looking at the FanDuel sims I did last night, it looks like about half of the top 150 for the $1 million one are 4 stacks. So like the sims are definitely encouraging you to load up on these teams.
Yeah, on FanDuel specifically, I think that the max stack length is criminally underused on these small slates. I would be playing, only 4 stacks on FanDuel. I'm trying to get different. So this is a more specific way you can do the same thing I set up where I'm playing at least 1 of Jared Goff, so he's forced in every lineup, and then I'm playing at least 4 of the main skill position players on the team. And that's a way you can also build lineups just specifically for 1 player or 1 team. This is still running. That's fine. We'll get these into a sim shortly. Do you have any sort of heuristics you like to apply on these shorter slates that we haven't really covered yet, or like ways you can attack swapping?
Yeah, I mean, just talking through the sim rules, like what I'm doing for tomorrow. First of all, I'm going to so I'm going to do a few different versions of sims. So like one version, I'm going to do like 10,000 sims per field, and then I'm going to up the number of generations. Now, like on DraftKings, you can't really do this for like they're at the $5, that's 600,000 entries. I don't even know if we may not even be able to complete a sim in time. That's so many lineups, but 3-game slate, maybe if you run 10,000 sims. So you'll want to test this out with like the bootleg is a good example. like maybe like a 30 or 40,000 entry contest. And then what I'll be doing is just running a lot of generations and just seeing the duplicate numbers on these lineups. And then I'll probably take some of the best lines from those and then throw them in the large contests and just see how they sim like with 50,000 sims. Just like one generation, 50,000 sims, see what my top lineups were, and then just see how they sim out and then choose from there. That's probably what I'm going to end up doing for FanDuel. But yeah, like the real advantage here of using the multiple contest generations is we're giving you kind of the variance and then not just the simulated outcomes of these lineups, but also the number of duplicates. So like one contest field, this lineup might only have one duplicate, and the next time you run a contest field, it might have 20 duplicates, which obviously is a substantial decrease in expected ROI. So I'll be kind of toying around with some different builds and kind of different sim rules here. But in general, like what I would do is like if I'm just running one, I would just do 50,000 sims, pick a 30 or 40,000 entry contest. So 5 generations is fine. And then I keep ROI pretty high because we're worried about duplicates for this slate. And I would just allow up to 4 against my defense and churn down minimum salary, probably 48,000 for DraftKings or 47,000. And on DraftKings, probably I would up the number of players allowed versus defense to like 6. Like I would just
right. We're going to get those overstack scenarios where we don't want to limit the quarterback playing against their own defense, especially on this slate.
Yep, but everything else there looks pretty good. Like the defaults for max off optimal number of stacks, it all looks fine to me. And you're going to naturally get stacks anyway, the small slate like this. But yeah, something like what you're doing right here looks pretty good. 80% on ROI. That's kind of my strategy for how I'm going to be using the Sims here. And then also another thing is I'm going to be messing with the correlations a lot. So we talked about Swift and Roshan Johnson. That's a pretty obvious place to throw some negative correlation on it, just because Roshan can vulture touchdowns from Swift, and if Swift gets hurt, Roshan's going to be the one that benefits. There's other spots. I mean, Ezekiel Elliott and Rico Dowdle, I guess, if you wanted to do that. But Tyrone Tracy and Devin Singletary is another good one. Waddle and Tyreek. So like all these situations where it's like most likely only one player is gonna end up being optimal and not both. These are spots where I'm going to be putting some native correlations.
Yeah, I like that shout too. One thing I like that you said and mentioned is that like as the number of games on the slate reduces, the more and more these duplicates matter, and the more and more that these contest generations matter, right? Because you brought up the point that if you only run one generation of Sims and you kind of get, like for example, like Bo Melton, maybe Bo Melton only shows up in 2 or 3% of lineups, and the Sims grade him out well, he's going to occupy a large number of those top lineups in ROI. But if you ran another generation with more Bo Melton than the first one, he's going to not grade out as well because he's higher owned in the contest. There's more ways for him to fail. And when he does win, he's splitting more money amongst more lineups.
Yep, exactly right.
So our optimizer ran. Obviously, you can see we've got a bunch of overstacks here for team overstacks. So I'm going to go over to add lineups here. And I'm going to import my optimizer that I just ran, this 5:47 p.m. one. And those are going to be loaded into the sim here. I've got the bootleg loaded, which is kind of like a nicer, higher dollar, lower entry, in the middle between the big contests and the smaller field ones. Check my standard deviation before we go. Good. Looks good. I'm going to go ahead and let this run. And we can't really do our under 10% for the slate because a lot of the under 10% stuff really, really sucks and probably is not worth playing. But what I thought we could do is just kind of go position by position and highlight somebody who's lower owned than you think they should be, or a guy who you think you'll be vastly over the field on.
Okay.
So at quarterback, ownership's pretty flat here, honestly. I'll sort by ownership. But
like the quarterback's tough this way. Like I feel like all the ownerships are pretty efficient here.
Yeah, even on a 3-gamer, past Thanksgivings, we've seen ownership creep up into the 40s and 50s on some quarterbacks, just given the game environments and production. But it's fairly spread out here. I think the guy that I think honestly is probably going underlooked might be Cooper Rush, at the lower end there, above Drew Lock, and I guess Trey Lance is projected for some points from ETR, but second lowest owned guy above Drew Lock, who I don't think you can really click on outside of large field stuff. Cooper Rush, good passing volume in the offense. CeeDee Lamb sets up his great leverage off of Rico Dowdle. Are you kind of in the same spot there for quarterback?
Yep. I will. The one thing, the nice thing about Caleb now that he's running the ball, he has a nice little higher floor, and the salary is pretty good. Yeah, I think this ownership is pretty good. I'll probably be a little under on Goff, would be my guess if I'm running 150, and then I would be over on the kind of the three below him on Love, Tua, and Rush. And I guess by proxy that would mean that I'm a little under on Caleb, but I'll probably be right around the field there. I think all that looks pretty good to me for DK.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Fiance just got home, so the dogs went nuts, but we're good now.
It's all good.
Yeah, Caleb points per dollar wise, obviously the best on the slate. I do like his upside. Field seems to be there at a decent rate, but I will be over that. Running back, obviously we have Rico Dowdle up top as the highest owned. I think he was much higher owned in a previous run of ETR stuff I did. I think he was up towards 60, but it looks like they brought that down. So maybe some signal there. Who are you liking to target in the lower ownership for running backs?
Man.
Or maybe just getting over the field on some guys.
Well, I don't want to take your Tyrone Tracy, you know.
I'm going somewhere else there, so.
Okay, I'll say Tyrone Tracy then. We'll go with Tyrone Tracy. That seems fine to me at 28%. Be a little over on that. I think my main take here is, especially on FanDuel, I'll be under on Dowdle and just hope for the best.
Yeah, $300 more on DK, half the ownership, just as much upside. It just makes sense there. Cowboys defense being shock as well. It just generates a ton of leverage, and you're still playing a good play. For me, it's going to be the Gibbs versus Monty split. So we kind of see it every week. Jahmyr Gibbs is higher priced, comes in with a slightly higher median and slightly higher ceiling as well. But I'll be playing both of them in a lot of lineups. I think they're both great plays. 100 yards and a touchdown for both of them on the slate's totally in play. So you save us $1,000 going to David Montgomery. You get 10 to 15 points of ownership off as well. There's Chicago narrative stuff as well. But for me, it's just that the Bears are susceptible on the ground. Monty runs like a freight train, and they will pound the rock against the Bears.
Yeah, what's the is his injury issue all good? He's fine, Monty?
Yeah, he had a shoulder. Both him and Amon-Ra were questionable. They practiced in full today. It was only a walkthrough, but they recorded a full practice, and I think that the beat reporting on them is that they're both, fully ready, good to go. I'm going to be playing them as if they are, because there's no point in me saying oh, he's kind of banged up, I'm going to dock his projection a couple points. I'm playing a tournament. Either he's fully healthy and smashes or he's not,
Yep. I'll probably also just be over the field in general on the Detroit double RB combo. I feel like that's probably going to be a little underutilized here.
Yeah, this 48% ownership on Daddle, I'm just throwing elsewhere. I'm going completely elsewhere. Yeah. DeAndre Swift's also probably a good shout to at 18%. The matchup's not good. The game script's not good, and the goal line work's not good. But there's pass there on a 3-gamer. So
yeah.
Tight end, we've got Jonnu coming up top, followed by Laporta, Kmet. Did you talk about Schoonmaker and the snaps on the Dallas side? Because I think he was
did a little bit, yeah. It's a span forward,
yeah. So tough there. I think Theo Johnson's also a tough click. I like the Kmet spot here. His ceiling is super high, and his ownership's third highest or last really among viable tight ends, right around Tucker Kraft. But I think he has a much higher ceiling than Tucker Kraft. Obviously, he just doesn't really get the same type of targets Kmet does.
Yeah, and Kmet also works as a fade off of Keenan Allen, whose ownership might creep up a little bit. So because he kind of takes the same short and intermediate routes, so that's kind of like a nice little added benefit of playing Kmet here if you're not playing Keenan Allen. I would probably negatively correlate Kmet and Keenan Allen for what it's worth when I'm using the Sims.
I'm with you there. It works out well for my Caleb Williams stacks. And the tight end spot in general is kind of hard to be here. I don't think I'll be getting too much two tight end stuff. I just think that there's so many good running back plays on the slate that I'm probably going running back at flex most scenarios.
Well, really, I think I'm going to be using more 3 receiver than 3 RB. Extra receiver on FanDuel. 4, yeah. I can't count. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, there's upside there for sure. But Johnny Smith at 36% and then Cole Kmet at 20%. I think they have similar, upsides. Obviously, the median's higher for Jonnu, and his role in the offense is probably better. But I think the ceiling is about the same for these top 3 tight ends. So you're saving money going to Kmet, and you're getting a bit of an ownership discount and leverage off of some of the chalkier Bears receivers.
Yeah.
Wide receiver, we have Lamb as a number 1 owned, and then Keenan Allen, Amon-Ra, DJ Moore. Where's a spot you like here at the receiving options?
Oh, man. I kind of want to say Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
Let's say Odunze at 20%. compared to the Keenan Allen, DJ Moore ownership. I really like that. I don't think you have to negatively correlate Odunze with the other receivers because of the way he his targets. He's not really taking away the same routes that Keenan Allen, for example, like Komet is. And then just in general, being over on the Dallas passing game and under on Rico Dowdle would be my kind of 2 takes here.
Yeah, I like that. Excuse me. I'm going to be higher.
Salud.
I want to pick up Jaden Reed here. He's pretty cheap on this slate, as all players are, but there's room for upside in this late game hammer. And it gives me pivot options as well in the game. So I like going to Jaden Reed here. His upside is really great. At 5,700, leaves a spot on your roster you can swap off of if you need to. Otherwise, you can play him if you're up. And, if the Josh Jacobs chalk doesn't hit, it's likely due to production from Jaden Reed.
Yeah. My other take, like I just said, would be I'm going to be using more receiver and flex than running back. At least I'm going to try to. I'm going to try to massage the Sims to give me that. I'm not going to explicitly force no running back in flex, but I will be kind of trying to encourage that because I do think all these receivers have much higher ceilings than all these running backs. I mean, we just talked about Tyreek, Jaden Reed, Malik Neighbors, CeeDee Lamb, St. Brown. All these guys have way higher ceilings, in my opinion, than we see from like Rico Dowdle and Tyrone Tracy. So I'll be trying to get receivers in flex here, even on FanDuel.
I like that a lot. Coming into defense, we've got Cowboys up top, followed by the Lions, and Giants, Packers, and Miami. Bears rounding out the bottom. I mean, we say it every week. Defense is not a spot to concentrate too much on. Just make sure you're not, overexposed in some areas. I like the Packers and the Lions here. Considering ownership, Packers at 10% feels kind of good. Going up against Tua turned the ball over, who's looked better recently, but even without Jair Alexander, the Packers secondary still has weapons to take the ball away. You can play the cold narrative, sure, maybe his hands are cramping up or something, but at 10%, Packers are fine.
Yep, I don't have much of a take here on the defenses. They all, I guess being under on the Cowboys and Giants defenses makes sense, but not really a strong take here.
Yeah, I'm with you. Let's take a look at our Sims and what they spit out for us. So first, before we start, I kind of want to look at just our optimizer lineups that we input and see out of our overstacks, which ones are performing the best. I'll go to a 150 set and to sort of look at QB exposure. So in our overstacks, it looks like the Sims actually are liking Jordan Love, followed by Goff and Tua. So a lot of love for that Green Bay, Miami environment, which I can see it shooting out. Achane and Gibbs are out, or Achane and Jacobs, not Gibbs, are garnering some ownership from that game, and people are kind of happy attacking it through the ground. There's, questionable scenarios on both sides as far as the receiving cores go. So it does kind of make sense to kind of flip the script there and go to that. We do see Caleb Williams and Cooper Rush coming in with a little bit of love for Drew Lock, but not much, and I kind of agree with him there.
Yeah. Yep, I'm pretty much in agreement here. I guess I'd probably say that's a little too much Goff for me. But otherwise, I think those, like if you swap Goff and Caleb ownership there, I'd probably be okay with that.
Yeah. And I was interested to see, so in these Jordan Love lineups, a lot of them are featuring Jacobs with the Sim. So kind of favoring a scenario where the Packers just put up a lot of points, or perhaps they get up early and Jacob gets some work, and then the game gets closer and they're dropping back more. But a lot of Jacobs. Wicks obviously popping up a ton. He's going to pop up pretty much everywhere, I think. And that's due to his low ownership at the moment. And his points per dollar is obviously really good as well.
Yeah. We do have a default positive correlation between running backs and quarterback. For this slate specifically, even I don't think there's a negative correlation between Love and Jacobs. I might do it just to force different lineups.
I'm kind of with you there. Like Josh Jacobs is going to be owned already. And there's, I don't really want to play him in the quarterback stack because Jordan Love, if he does get there and throw 300 for 4, or 300 for 3, it's probably not going to result in a game where Jacobs is producing a winning lineup. And then you can fit in guys like Monty Gibbs. You can fit in, Dowdle or Tyrone Tracy if you want. So the way you could do that in the sim or in your lineup builder tool here is just filter down to your Jordan Love lineups, click on Josh Jacobs, and hit the trash can. Another way you could do it is what Jung said, is in the actual sim tab here, you can set up a player correlation between Jordan Love and Josh Jacobs. and just give them like a slight negative correlation. Not -2, that would be a pretty huge correlation.
Yeah.
So those are ways you can do that. And now we can see, obviously, we've got Packers, 4-man stacks with pass catchers there. So yeah.
Yep, that looks good.
What else should we cover? Are there any like sort of roster constructions you want to take a look at and how they perform in the sim? I guess we can open it up to all the generated lineups as well.
No, not that you could do quickly. I'd be curious to see the difference in ROIs between like we were kind of talking about who to play in flex here. Curious to see how like a receiver in flex does versus a running back. And it looks like in here, it looks like a lot of, I don't want to say a lot actually. It looks like about 50-50 here. It doesn't seem like there's a strong lean either way, I guess would be my general takeaway.
Yeah, I mean, the strong lean there would be no double tight end. We have one double tight end with Laporta and Jonnu here and a Jared Goff overstack.
You just don't need it on this slate, I think. The salary is just easy to get to on DraftKings especially. So you just
like the upside between these two lineups with Laporta Jonnu and Laporta CD, I mean, like there's just more upside at the wide receiver and running back position than there is tight end.
Yeah, and you can see it in the simulated ceiling too. 302. That's probably that's the lineup to play at 302 ceiling.
Ooh, you got a burner here.
Yeah.
Tim Patrick. Ooh, that's a milli dart right there. Tim Patrick.
Oh yeah.
Other ways you can get different on the slate as well, outside of roster construction, is leaving salary on the table. So you can see these lineups that sim out well are using a lot of the salary. If you just kind of set a cap here, and this also is beneficial for late game swapping. So I set a salary cap of $49,400. That gives you, at least $600 to work with in the late slate to pivot off of stuff. It's like, for example, this is Tua, Josh Jacobs, Hill, Jonnu, and Wicks. You could easily pivot off Jacobs and get to a higher, more expensive wide receiver just because you have more salary left over.
Yep, and for all DFS slates, doesn't matter if it's Classic or Showdown, there's an exponential relationship between salary used and number of duplicates. So like the closer you are to 50,000, the more likely you are to be duplicated. So yeah, just leaving like 49,500 is like a pretty simple way in general to avoid duplicates. Yeah,
it's inverse. Like it's inverse, but you get the idea, right? So like up here is 50,000 salary. You'll get a majority of the people using 50,000, and then a bit fewer 49.9, a bit fewer 49.8, and by the time you get down to 49,400, you're already eliminating 90% of the lineups in the field.
Yeah, and it's the same for like if you were to look at the average number of duplicates per lineup, instead of on your y-axis, instead of just the number of lineups, it's the same relationship.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was a pretty good show. Is there anything you want to say to the folks before we hop off?
No, are you making anything for Thanksgiving?
I'm in charge of the mashed potatoes.
Okay. I'm in charge of dessert.
Nice. I'm in charge of mashed potatoes and the alcohol.
Oh, nice.
You're not
Well, the mashed potatoes kind of sucks to make because you got to actually mash it.
I use a potato racer.
Yeah, but you still got to do it, right? Like it's not,
Well, yeah,
it's not like baked potatoes where you just throw it on a pan.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for tuning in. You're not a Levitan guy where you're ordering Chinese on Thanksgiving?
No, come on. No, you got to have what's the point?
I know. I'm with you.
I'm making a pumpkin cheesecake with ginger snap crust, some homemade English toffee crumbled over the top. It's gonna be bomb.
I'll give you this recommendation, and whoever's watching or stumbles upon it. Best mixed drink for the holidays: Di Serono and Dr. Pepper.
Really?
My favorite, yeah. Simple combo. Huh. I like it a lot. It's good. If you're new here or you want to try out our tools, the stuff we've demoed here is all available under our AceMind plan, and you can get 30% off for our Black Friday deal. Just enter promo code BF30 when you sign up, and you'll get 30% off your first month. Thanks for tuning in, Owe. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Good luck tomorrow, guys, and happy Thanksgiving.
Yep. Happy Thanksgiving.